Hello, I am going to be doing a tutorial today on how to make your own almond butter. And so there are several different variations that you can do. You can use any nuts for this, but today I'm going to use almonds. I've done pecan butter, I've done pecan walnut almond butter. You can certainly do the same thing with different types of nuts. What's going to vary is the amount of oil, natural oil that comes out of the nut once you roast it. I choose to roast my nuts first before I make a nut butter. You certainly can do a raw nut butter where you just, they aren't roasted, okay? So what you need for this whole project is almonds. I have a pound here that I'm going to make today. A really good healthy fat oil, and I'm going to be using avocado oil today. Pink Himalayan sea salt, a bowl, a food processor, and then also an oven to roast your nuts. So I'm going to be taking these nuts, putting them in the bowl, and I'm just going to drizzle a little bit of avocado oil on them. Not a whole lot, just enough to coat. I'm going to mix them up so, as I mentioned, that you get to coat them. Now, almonds tend to be very dry, so even when I've not added an oil, sometimes I've done grass-fed butter, I've melted it and put it on there as well. But you just want it to be enough so they get coated, all right? Then I'm going to arrange them on the cookie sheet. You can do it on parchment paper. My parchment is, it's an actual woven fabric that I use. It's reusable. So I'm going to put them on a single layer, and I'm not going to salt them. I'm going to salt when I make the butter. So I'm going to put these in the oven, 350 degrees, middle of the oven, and I'm going to roast them for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. What I do is I set a timer for 5 minutes. At the end of 5 minutes, I stir them, and then I set it for 10 minutes or 5 more minutes. Check them. When you start to smell them is when they're done, and you have to be careful because if you get them in the oven too long, obviously they get really dark, and then it changes the flavor of the nut butter, okay? So I'm gonna keep them in the oven now for 5 minutes. At the end of 5 minutes, I'm going to stir, and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay, the nuts have been roasting for 10 minutes, and I can smell them, so I'm going to take them out of the oven. The other thing I heard was some pops, kind of like popcorn would do. So that tells me that there are some that are in here that are definitely done. So you can see now that they're real shiny, still from the oil. They're a little bit darker. But what I end up doing is then I take them out. I'm making all kinds of noise. And then I take them off of this pan and I put them on top of the cooling rack. So let me get that organized. Right now it's on the cooling rack. Turn off the oven, right? And I'll let you see how I do this magical stuff. Because this is hot. Do it as they're cooling. So then I just take the pan off, put it right on top of that cooling rack. Ooh. Okay, and I spread them out so that they can cool. I don't know if you can see them a little bit better. So now I'm just going to let them cool for, oh, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes until they're not hot to touch, basically. They can be warm when you put them in the food processor, but I like to let them cool completely so that I can make the nut butter then. Okay, so let them cool for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. Okay, so it's about been 15 minutes. My almonds are now cool. They are there is a little bit of a warmth to them, but they're not hot. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in my food processor. I have a KitchenAid food processor. I've tried to do this in my Vitamix, and I know my food processor a little bit better than I do the Vitamix that I have, but I'm going to put all of these almonds right into the container here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of sea salt, and you can do this to taste. One recommendation is, this is a mill. I would, if you can find the finely ground pink Himalayan sea salt, use that instead. When these don't come out very even, so that sometimes the salt will settle at the bottom of your nut butter. So anyway, I'm gonna put that on, the lid on, and I want to turn that on high, and I'm just gonna let it blend. Okay, and you see it's starting to chop it up. It's going to start getting really thick, and I'm just going to let it go until it starts to create a ball. Okay, so I'm going to take off the lid now. I'm going to stir it up a little bit. It's not quite into a ball because it doesn't have a whole lot of oil, natural oils in almonds like, say, pecans do. The last batch of pecan butter that I made, I did not need to add any oil to it. It was enough natural oil in the pecan that I didn't need to. I'll put this back on again and try it one more time. And I do have it on high. Okay, it is not, so this is how I kind of decide whether I'm going to add any oil or not. It is not getting, it's not starting to break down into a paste at all. As you can see, it's still quite crummy. So I'm going to start very slowly drizzling in oil. And like I said, I'm choosing to do olive oil. Or not olive oil, avocado oil. You can use olive oil, you can use MCT oil, you could use coconut oil. The one thing I will caution you about with coconut oil is when you put it in the refrigerator, it will harden a little bit, so you're gonna have to leave it sit out before you use it, unless it's a liquefied kind of coconut oil, and I don't know how they do that, so I don't necessarily use that kind of coconut oil. Turn it on high and very slowly just drizzle some avocado oil in. It might take a teaspoon, it might take a tablespoon. It just depends on the dryness of the nuts themselves. Okay, I'm going to give it a little bit of help. This is just something you, over time, after you practice and do it, it's starting to get into big chunks now, if you can see. Okay? It's something over time that I've just kind of learned to watch the consistency of the nuts. And I'm just going to continue to keep it on high, and we'll see what happens. Okay, now it is starting to become more of a butter. It's starting to blend a little bit more. I'm going to have to stir it one more time because I can see that here on the bottom you can see the different colors. And it might pick it up on its own. You can see it's starting to gather together and create more of a butter consistency. Okay, I'm going to do one more stir. See if I can get the nuts that are on the bottom. I don't ever take the blade out, but I do try to pick up what's underneath the blade just by turning it on its own. Pull it out from underneath and stir some things around. And again, you just kind of have to play with it for a while when you first start trying to make your own nut butter. This is what has worked for me. I want to add just a little bit more of the oil, and you watch how quickly it will turn into more of a liquid. It's very much a paste now. It's not the right consistency for me. I like mine a little bit runny because I usually use mine as a dip for fruit or vegetables or in my smoothie. So I definitely will continue to add just a teeny tiny bit more of oil so that it becomes a little less thick than it is right now. Okay. Do another check. Like I said, it doesn't take long, but it just depends on what consistency you want it. So that's pretty good for me right there. But I'm going to just do one more swipe of the bottom because sometimes in my food processor, some of the almonds get stuck underneath the blade and they don't get out into the mix, and then it's kind of more chunky than it is blended. So I'm just going to scrape that off, get that all in there, mix it all in one more time, and then it's ready for my jar. This out of the way. Hopefully you can see where you are. Just tilt that down a little bit. And then you'll get to see that I did add a little bit more at the end because I like it just a little bit thinner than what it was. And I scrape all the goodies off. Your food processor might be a little different than mine. You're just going to have to play around with it a little bit. And then we just pour it into the jar. And try not to make as big a mess as I have. Now that was 1 pound of almonds that I used. It's probably a better idea to get organic, but geez, I got a mess on that. And there you have it. Homemade almond butter straight from your kitchen. Enjoy.